All right. Hello, everyone. We're back after a longer than planned hiatus. Apologies for that. I have been showing up on other people's shows, which has been nice. And one of those very nice people who had me on wanted to come on my show to talk about Tolkien. Who else would I invite him to come on to talk about since he is a Catholic? Caleb, hello, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We are at opposite ends of the contiguous United States, and we are talking about a very august English gentleman. So I don't know what we
Yes.
make of that. I myself am Anglo-Maxing. I have my port wine poured, and I think you are consuming the finest of treats. It sounded like a Red Bull in a mason jar.
It is a blueberry Red Bull and a mason jar, followed by a wintergreen Zen and a blueberry vape.
This, as
So
they
we are
say,
maxing.
as yes, as I've read on Catholic Twitter, reject sin, embrace Zin. So
I have not heard of that yet, but
okay.
that is incredible. I would say the only one I saw like that was a picture of the AI Pope Francis in the puffer jacket, and it
Yes.
said, "Forgive me, Lord, for I have zinned." Phenomenal.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, it's great to
Mm.
have you on. Today we are looking at one of my personal, so you were very nice in letting me kind of sort of badger you into discussing this text. One of my all-time favorite things that Tolkien ever wrote, and he wrote so many good things.
You
Uh,
did.
it's an essay on fairy stories, and I will say that usually I think had you heard of this essay before?
No, I have not. I'm not heard of it. I'm honestly, when
Okay.
it comes to Token, it's my biggest like Catholic sin is I've not finished. I'm stuck at the Two Towers, and I have not finished Lord of
Oh,
the Rings. I know. Well, my thing is I don't have time to read. So I do audiobooks, but I'm not going to listen to this to 10 minutes here and there. If I'm going to do a Token audiobook, I'm going to listen for hours. So it's really only
yes.
road trips that I get the window to listen to it.
Now this does pertain to Tolkien, so let's just go a few steps down this rabbit hole. Have you been listening to the Andy Serkis audiobooks?
Is it Andy Serkis one?
Yes. So over the past few years, Andy Serkis has recorded all of them, and those are the best.
Yeah, so
So
the ones I'm listening to, let me bring up my app real quick. It's by who's doing the reading? Title details. It's what is that? Rob Ingus, who has a very good like British voice and kind of get all of
yes,
them like this very classical
yes,
British folk hero kind of vibe to it, which I do appreciate that vibe. But I can't imagine he's better than Andy Serkis because it's Andy
it's
Serkis.
Andy Serkis. Yeah, I recommend
It's
all the listeners get the Andy Serkis ones. They're just so wonderful. Anywho, yeah. So hey, it's totally fine. I know like Tolkien's not always the most approachable. He's very dense. Uh,
yes. Well, he's a master of living. I mean, I said this earlier. Like when you're Catholic, all your best writers aren't really going to be writing in English. So when you get those people who are masters of the English language, you have to kind of sit there and appreciate them. Like when you try to read Saint John Henry Newman, or you try to read Tolkien or Testament or Belloc, like these people are actually masters of the English language,
yep.
and it's when you read them, like you have to just appreciate that we get to read these brilliant thinkers in English. But normally we always get these great like Aquinas or Bonavent or
Right.
Augustine. We get them true translation. So getting these people
Yeah.
in English is such a treat.
Yes.
That you have to kind of appreciate that and kind of just work with them in their framework or in their denseness.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah. Tolkien is very Catholic, but
Mm,
he's also very English. And me
yes.
doing the whole Anglican thing, I'm like, I might not be Roman, but the Catholic thing I can vibe with, and the English thing I can definitely vibe with. So, yeah, a lot of people know Tolkien obviously from Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit. Everyone forgets The
Mhm.
Hobbit. The Hobbit's also equally good.
I think The
Uh,
Hobbit's my favorite thing he's ever written.
yeah,
The Hobbit is I reread that probably at least twice a year.
it's so
It's so good.
it's so good. The first time I read The Hobbit was one summer, I think between third and fourth grade, and I was in a tree. I would
Oh,
climb up in the tree in the summer and read The Hobbit.
dude, I did that
Um,
with my Percy. I did that growing up with the Percy Jackson books.
yeah, yeah.
I
No,
was
trees are really good for fantasy. If you're in a tree reading fantasy, you're already halfway into Narnia or wherever at that point.
you were on the
Uh,
border of fairyland, as you would
exactly. You're
say.
right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So Tolkien, obviously known for the mythology, the really a
Mhm.
great piece of modern mythology. We've talked a little bit on this show, I think over a year ago with Elliot. who comes on frequently. We talked about we did some Silmarillion stuff, but
Nice, nice.
yeah. So the fictional world, what Tolkien would call the secondary world, is
Mm,
really what he's remembered and known for, quite justifiably, like amazing stories. But people kind of forget, I think, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying like the general public forgets that he was a professor. And
yeah.
he was actually a world expert in Anglo-Saxon,
Hmm.
aka Old English, and Beowulf.
I mean, I have his translation of Gawain the
Yep,
Green Knight right next to me.
it's a great translation.
It
He
really is.
spoke several languages, a
Mhm.
very accomplished translator, very accomplished teacher by all accounts. And so can you just imagine being in his class? Holy shit, that would be amazing.
But have you heard the
Unfortunately,
story for where the Hobbit came from?
yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
he turned over the grading of paper, got bored.
Like
Yeah.
apparently some student like turned in a blank paper for an essay assignment, and he was just so proud of the student, which is awesome.
Yeah. He by all accounts from what I've read, it seems like he was continually thinking about other worlds and other places and was kind of
Mhm.
absent-minded, which is kind of a wonderful thing, I think.
Yeah.
But so he was a professor, and unfortunately we don't have his lectures recorded, but we
Yeah.
do have some essays that he wrote
Mhm.
and published. We also have his letters. And so those two are really wonderful sort of minds of just good little Arkenstones
Mhm.
of wonderfulness. On fairy stories, you hadn't read it before. Very few people that I talked to actually have read it. I was reading the book
Mhm.
the other day in public, and somebody walked up to me and said, "Oh, like Tolkien essays?" I was like, "Oh yeah, like on fairy stories is maybe the best thing he ever wrote." And the lady walked away, I think, kind of like, maybe I need to read that now.
Yeah.
Very
I
few
will
people.
say,
Yeah, go ahead.
trying to read it, getting through the first half was not a chore is the word I'll use because it was a task. It's a very rewarding task, but it's still a kind of a chore to get through the first half. But
Yes.
it's totally worth it for that. The way he ends it makes the whole thing worth it.
Oh yeah. And I will that's the thing I'm always struck by. Every time I read any Tolkien, but particularly this
Mhm.
essay, I get something new out of it, but I'm reminded of how incredibly smart he was,
Mhm.
and how incredibly well read. So I have a
Mhm.
PhD in a related field to Tolkien's,
Mhm.
and I am so much lower down on the rung than I will like than him. Like I'm like I have a PhD, and it's not like I could never match him. Like I'm like,
But man, those 20th century intellectuals were something else.
mhm.
They always been like a master of all the fields, you know. Like
Oh
you
yeah,
read like Ludwig von Mises loved like knew all the poetry from Virgil. Erich
yep,
von Kuhnert knew everything. It felt like well even Rosbard, like being the one of the later ones, still
yep.
incredibly. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of his philosophy stuff, but incredibly well rounded and everything.
Yeah.
Um,
Modern
there's something
PhD
lost.
programs, yeah, modern PhD programs are so overly specified and narrowed that
Yes.
I really only feel enough about my personal life choices, but I really only feel like it's after I've gotten the PhD that I'm finally becoming a well-rounded person. But
Yeah.
um, regardless, on fairy stories is, I guess, well, we'll start jumping in that way. On fairy stories, my take on it is it's Tolkien's exploration, not just of fairy stories per se, but of really the birth of language and story, and like where does language come from? Where does story come from? How are they connected? And what do they tell us about the world around us, about humans' place in the world around us, and then ultimately how humans and the world fit within the greater tree of being. That's kind of, I guess, how I would,
Yeah, I would say one of the
yeah,
great points he made in it that I love was he's talking about Solomon's muzzle or when the archbishop slipped on like a banana peel.
yeah,
And he did talk about those events. Like, he brings up this great line. I'm gonna read it here.
yeah. Read it away. Go ahead.
I would say this is Tolkien's words. I would say that Solomon's muzzle and the archbishop were put into the pot. It refers to the history of like the literary genre and the pool that everyone pools from is like the soup kind of thing.
Yep.
It's a great way to put it, I think, the soup. So I would say Solomon's muzzle and the archbishop were put into the pot. In fact, got into the soup. They were the new bits added into the stock. A considerable honor, for in that soup were many things older, more potent, and more beautiful, comic or terrible, than they were in themselves considered simply as figures of history. Like it's point that they transcended from being figures of this history to figures of mythology, and that the mythology figures are based on historical figures. His whole breakdown of Thor and connection to like the farmer he imagines who was the inspiration for Thor, and the whole connection between like there's a whole details we really get into that as well. But
Oh
the
yeah.
way he paints it is when a historical figure transcends from just being a historical figure to being a man of legend. Like that is like the highest honor someone can attain, kind of saying. I think of like the heroes of the West, like so it's the Lionheart or Duke Godfrey of Bouillon, like these heroes of the West who their feats are so insane. You say that has to be fake, but I don't believe it is fake because it is so cool in of themselves that they have transcended from mere historical figure to legendary figures, and that's a not many figures obtained that honor. I feel like Napoleon was like the last one.
Yeah, Napoleon maybe. I think there's
Right.
some World War II figures maybe have
Mm,
done something similar a little bit, but it
mm,
hasn't been long enough since World War II for them to really hit the true,
mm.
no, like they hit maybe the legendary status, but not the mythological status, right?
Yes.
Not like Charlemagne, right? Not like
Yeah.
not like Constantine, not like,
Mm.
it's different.
Not King Arthur. King
Not
Arthur
King
was
Arthur,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, so one of the things that I think we'll circle back to let's the Thor thing in like 2 seconds
Yeah.
here. One of the things that I love in this essay, and I'll link to it so everyone can read it. I highly recommend it. It is dense,
Mhm.
but it's totally worth it, as Caleb said. It's totally pays
Yeah.
off in the
And
end.
if you have a hard time reading it on YouTube, on I think it's Catholic audiobooks on YouTube, they have a 2 hour recording of a guy with a great voice just reading it out to you. And
I will
also
link to that as well. Yeah.
in America, apparently it's happened a few times now, where people do like these plays where they dress up as Tolkien and they go up there and just read this to the audience as like a
Oh wow,
performance. Yeah.
that's cool.
So you can imagine going,
Awesome.
it's well, I watched one on YouTube, and the guy walks up. I'm very happy to be with you here, considering I died in 1970 something. He does that whole historical reenactment bit. And I'm like, okay, dude, we get it, but just get to this, get to the point.
Yeah, that's
But
great. I'll
it's
link to both of
incredible.
those. Yeah, I can appreciate the LARP. I love that.
Mm.
It's not a Middle Earth LARP. It's a literal Tolkien LARP. I'm LARPing as Tolkien. Well, if anyone who watches this show will know that my whole life, I mean, as many Tolkien fans' lives are, like we're all just LARPing as Tolkien. Like, I'm looking up at the trees and I'm smiling, thinking about all the little elves up there, and then I'm going out and
Mhm.
I'll smoke a pipe or I'll drink some port and I'll think about the world and look at the sunshine and like I'm Tolkien LARPing. I'm living the life that he would want me to live, right? I'm looking
Yes,
at the virtue in everyday things.
there was something about the absent-minded Englishmen. Like Chesterton was very much like this as well. Where
Yeah,
Chesterton took both absent-minded and I think it was Chesterton who said it's absent-minded is not what I. It's like I'm not absent-minded. My mind is present elsewhere.
well said. Yeah,
And I think Tolkien's mind was just like when he wasn't present, he wasn't absent. He was present in fairyland and
yep,
fairy ward.
yeah,
He was present in the second ward.
yeah.
He has that line about like we escape in the time. It's a separate time. I'm saying find it real quick. I ended up getting too many quotes, and now I'm trying to find them.
I know I had the same problem. There's too many bangers. I actually wrote
No,
a couple on banger. Yeah.
I
So good.
I sent to a friend of mine today. I'm just go to that set and find it there because I know that's what it's going to be at. Book club. Here it is. Where did I put it? They open fairy stories. They open a door on other time, as if we pass through. So only for a moment, we stand outside our own time, outside of time itself, maybe.
Well, and maybe that's a place where we can jump into like the need for escape. So in this
Mhm,
essay, Tolkien vehemently defends escape, capital E,
mhm,
as a legitimate and virtuous way of living in the world. And so
mhm,
the way I read that is he's reacting against a very Victorian. Again, he's not in the Victorian era, but having been born in the Victorian era, he had experienced a childhood of this sentiment that like,
mhm,
oh, fairy stories are for the little children, and then when you
mhm.
grow up, right, you put away childish things, which is a total horrible misuse of what Paul's talking about.
Yes.
Right, and that throughout the essay, rather, Tolkien keeps coming back to this point that actually fantasy slash fairy stories slash myth, whatever you want to call it, is actually crucial for adults and children, and that
Mhm,
it's actually really important to be thinking about these things. So escape an escape from out of our primary, what he calls the primary world, the world that we all at least sort of agree we live in. Although I will tell you, you can tell that this was written not a current piece, because now I don't even know if we share a common primary world, which is maybe a topic we can jump into later. But an escape from the primary world into what Tolkien calls the
Mhm,
secondary world, capital S, capital W. He defends that, and obviously
mhm.
this is a Tolkien friendly channel. But I was wondering if you had any like, how did that jive with you? Was that shocking to
It
you?
actually, I read it at the perfect time because I've been reading Korean German philosopher Ben Sul-han, who is on
Okay.
the Burnout Society and the Overachievement Society that we live in, and he has this book called The Sense of Time, where he argues that we don't experience time anymore. We simply have moments that we just link in some like narrative in our own heads. That people just forget. That's why people feel like time is passing so fast because they never actually stop to appreciate the moment.
Yep.
And I feel like the escapism is kind of like the solution to that burnout society, where it's like we never actually let our minds wander. We're always consuming more and more information. We are in an information age of pure consumerism.
Yep.
And so this escapism thing here is actually, I think, not even this useful. I would say it's necessary in today's age
Yep.
just to escape from the constant onset of consumerism, because we all try to flee from that demon behind us called boredom.
Oh
That we're
yeah.
all just trying to flee from that actually being bored, letting your mind wander into these into fairy world is actually not just useful, it is needed today.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know about you. You seem like a very, having just listened to a little bit of your channel, been on your show, you seem like a very introspective person who likes to think.
I
And
do.
so I'm certain you'll have had a similar experience to this, but I find that the time, so if I'm sitting down and like trying really hard to figure out a solution to this one problem, whether it's like a life problem, an academic problem, I'm trying to make a
Mhm.
breakthrough in research, I'm trying to write some more fiction or whatever it is, if I sit down and try really hard, it actually doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's usually when I'm like going for a walk, going for a run, taking a shower, or taking a shit, that I'll have these like moments of like, whoa, like where this is like true breakthrough moments, is always like doing something else. But it's where I'm doing something else and I'm like free associating, right? I'm away with the fairies, as they would say in Scotland, right? I'm
Mhm.
just kind of like in this other zone. And then you get these little moments of, and they're not like great big revelations. I'm not
Mhm.
having a Thomas Aquinas moment, but I am having this like, oh, I never really thought about this that way, right?
Like, yeah,
Uh,
you're absent. Your mind is wandering, and then you have a revelation hits, and you kind of like snap back into reality, like you've been thrown
yep,
out of fairy world. And you're just like, you realize I'm sitting in my chair, and I just figured that out by accident. You know,
exactly.
I think it's like the Chinese principle, like do by not doing, or whatever that is, like Hinduism or Buddhism, or like
Yeah.
it's like or as we call it, the sour principle. But like if you're stuck with a problem, take a sour and just focus on taking the sour and see if your mind wanders and happens to wander into the solution.
Yeah, I'm one of those
Um,
weird guys too. I take cold showers. I'm a strange person. And something about the intense coldness of the shower really just forces you to have to go somewhere else. If it's a cold day, particularly up here in the north, I'm like, because even in the winter,
Yeah,
I
I
won't
wouldn't
take
take.
warm showers.
The only way I'd take a cold shower is if the Pope told me that counts as a plenary and indulgence to get me a time out of purgatory. That's the only time I'm taking a cold shower.
It was weird. I gave up. I did it for one Lent, and I just kind of kept doing it.
Mm.
And I don't know. I mean, it's not going to cure cancer, but wouldn't it be nice? But
Yeah, I thought that's the one thing that the Exodus 90 saying people Catholics do.
yeah.
They say take cold showers, and most people I know who did it end up sticking with the cold shower saying. And I'm like, you're an insane person, but so many people are doing it that I feel like the insane person for not doing it.
Well, but a cold shower in Florida is going to be like 70 degrees, so come on. Anyhow,
Well, that's the weird part. Like you get a very, very like all day sweating, but then you have that 25-minute drive home when you've cooled off and you just want to relax in the warm shower. But if you go immediately from like the field walk to the shower, you're like, yeah, I want a cold shower. You know,
yeah,
so
I get that.
it's just so many variables in play
Yeah,
there.
very true. But regardless, it's like during a shower, doing something else, and yeah, you get
Mhm.
the snap back to reality, like you say, like it'll snap you back to reality faster than mom's spaghetti. Anyhow, that's a stupid millennial joke about Eminem. But like, yeah, and then all of a sudden you have to write it down, right? You have that
Mhm.
moment of inspiration. Um, and I find that escape is so necessary. And as you say, just to reiterate what you said, escape is so necessary in our modern age, particularly our
Mhm.
postmodern age, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it.
The age of information is what I'm calling it.
Yeah, the age of the god of information that is
Mhm.
not wisdom, right? Anyone who plays
Mhm.
D&D knows that intelligence is not wisdom, we have all this intelligence and no wisdom, and I think the
Mhm.
wisdom comes from having that escape.
Yeah.
Um, And it's a shame. And I mean, I guess maybe I have to acknowledge my historical guilt as a Protestant that I think, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up on Protestantism, but I do think the more extreme strains of Protestantism, particularly like, puritanical
Mm,
understandings, like people who, the Puritans who during the time of Shakespeare were like, trying to get theater shut down and stuff like that.
yeah.
We in the Anglophone world, whether you be Catholic, Protestant, or something else, we're still dealing with that, right? The
Hmm.
ramifications of that puritanical strain in the culture. And I think that Tolkien, as a Catholic, but also a very English Catholic, is quite valiantly riding out on his horse and being like,
Yeah.
no, escape is actually, no, escape can be bad, but it can
Mm,
also be really good, right? Like
mhm.
anything, he says, right? Like anything can be misused. You can
What was
turn
that
anything
Latin phrase
bad.
he used? I haven't learned. I have it written down here.
Abusus non tollit usum. So the
The
abuse does
misuse of
not,
this, yeah.
the abuse
Abuse
of
of,
it.
good.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah, the abuse of a saying does not deny the use of the saying, or something like that.
yeah, abusus non tollit usum. Yeah, it's a great little phrase, and it's true.
Really
Like
good.
it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I think maybe a overly internet way of translating that would be, you know, it's okay to like things. It's it's okay to like things.
Hmm.
It's okay to like, and some things are bad, obviously, but it's okay to
Yeah.
like stories that send you to another world and make you think about a secondary world,
Mhm.
because it's really only by going to that secondary world that you can truly properly view our world. Um, so yeah, I mean, even just for me, I love that Tolkien is so kind of, I mean, almost autistically like defending this. Escapism is a good
Mhm.
thing. Escapism is not bad. It's actually really good. Um, and if you think a little, I mean, not to think about Tolkien's like, life story, um, having to deal with having lived through trench warfare. I mean, I would
Yeah.
also want some escape, right?
Hmm.
I
Hey,
mean,
real
his whole
quick,
generation, really.
you
Um,
might real quick, this is a
yeah, go ahead.
random sidebar question, but
No,
you
sidebars are
might
welcome.
know. On a computer, when you're trying to search through like the text page or a document, what's
Mhm.
the hotkey for that? Was it F7 or was it F? Do you know?
I use Mac, so it's always Control F for me, or
Let me see
Command
if
F.
that.
Command
Okay,
F.
that works for
Yep.
me. Thank you.
Yep.
'Cause I'm trying to find a specific part of the um of one of the quotes, and I just cannot find it, and so I'm just typing it
Keyword
in.
search is your friend. Yep.
Yes. Okay. That's not okay. Apparently he's. Oh yeah, he's English. He's gonna spell the word differently than I do. I'm not gonna be able to find it yet. Okay, never mind. No, I would say on his defensive escapism is actually really good, necessary, and I think it's how to put this. I'm gonna quote Bang Sul-Han real quick, and it then lead into the point I want to make.
Connect it. Do it.
The point, so Bang Sul-Han this quote saying the motto of the digital order is being is information, and all of being is therefore available and controllable. Um, and I think living in this information age where we have that as like a implicit motto for most people is that when you escape it into a second word, which is not all. Like so, it says the second word is true inside that word. It is not always going to be true in this word.
Right.
That they modern mind cannot comprehend that and actually escape because we escape into what? If it's not material, therefore it's not real. Therefore, we're escaping to what? Like the
Right.
materialist frame is locked out. It's basically let's lock the door. The materialist frame locks the door to fairyland.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't know how we get through that point. I think we get through that by enchantment, which is actually nature again.
Yeah.
Um, or
Maybe
was
enchantment is the
sorry.
key, nature's the key, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's that Zachary Tom was a French Thomist. He had the point that is beauty is not something you just look at and go, oh, that's nice. Beauty is something that grabs you by the shoulders and shakes you and says, hey, go tell someone about this. Appreciate this. Like it shakes you out of whatever funk you're in. And I think that is the way to actually break that material's frame is to shake them out of it through beauty. It's through beauty.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. No, and it's interesting, the more it's interesting when you get these little Thomist bits of nuggets, and I'm like, as a Protestant, I have this sort of like knee-jerk reaction against the word Thomist, but then I'm like, but actually that shaking you out of your stupor, out of your funk, that jives pretty well with, with a more Protestant understanding. So maybe I need to give you Thomist people a little bit,
well, there are some
maybe a
pretty
little
good
bit.
reformed Thomists out there, Might
Well,
be worth looking into.
Thomas Aquinas kind of set the ground for Protestantism, but that's a topic for another
Well,
day.
that may not a topic, maybe a debate, but we can have that one later.
Yeah. I'm willing to defend it in single combat, but that's okay.
Pistols or swords? You're choice, English man.
Yeah, fists? I don't know.
Works for me.
Yeah. We'll have to pick a point in the exact middle of the country for us to fly to. And yeah. Alex Jones can referee. It'll be great.
Before we get into like the historical side and the historical mixed legendary side, I want to read this maybe a little long, but it's from Chesterton's. Chesterton wrote a popular level short history of England for the common man, and it's a very good book. Very fun to read. My 2 cents on it is that it's going to make more sense if you actually know English history, because he kind of just throws names out there and assumes you know who they are.
Right.
But he has this line where he talks about where was that here? What's that find here? That's not the right one. Okay, I'm trying to find it. I'm gonna just Google it real quick. Hold on.
You're good.
Short
There's
history
no
of
rush.
England. Short
It's a
history
Friday. There's no rush.
of England. Chesterton. Anyway, the point he's making is that he goes from like these. He opens his history of England up as opens up the history of Rome pretty much. Like he starts with Rome and moves on from there.
Right.
Here it is. Let me scroll down to it. Chapter 2. No, sorry, chapter 3. We should be startled if we were quietly reading a prosaic modern novel and somewhere in the middle it turns without warning to a fairy tale. We should be surprised if one of the spinsters in Cranford, after tidily sweeping her room with a broom, were to fly away on a broomstick. Our attention would be arrested if one of Jane Austen's young ladies, who had just finished meeting a drogon, walked in a little further and met a dragon. It's something very like this extraordinary tradition takes place in British history. At the end of the purely Roman period, we have to do with the rational, almost mechanical accounts of encampment engineering, of a busy bureaucracy and occasional frontier wars, quite marred in their efficiency and inefficiency. And then all of a sudden, we are reading of wandering bells and wizards' lances, of wars against men as tall as trees or as tall as toadstools. The soldier of civilization is no longer fighting with the gospel with goblins. The land becomes a labyrinth of fairy towns unknown to history, and scholars can suggest but cannot explain how a Roman ruler or a roast chieftain towers up in the twilight as an awful and unbegotten also. The scientific age comes first, and the mythology age comes after it. Which is his which I think that's a good thing. Before we get into like, any conversation about history and like a legend, that transition from like the bureaucracy of Rome to out of nowhere, it's like, hey, there's goblins and wizards out here now.
Yeah.
From the fall of Rome effect that had on the English mind, or if you want to get really crazy about it, the fall of the science and the materialist view of the materialist view, all the science and effectiveness of the Roman world led the fairies and elves coming back into the world, and as the Industrial Revolution, they kind of left again.
Yep. Well, and I think we mentioned on the live stream that you were very generous to have me on. That I think I mentioned at least that. Yeah. So it's this constant process of the fairies leaving and coming back, right? And I feel like they've left for a while. And Tolkien is maybe on the cusp of re-enchantment, right? Or let's say Chesterton, Belloc, and then following generation Tolkien, right? Like they're on the cusp of they're starting the re-enchantment, and I really think that I mean fairies are back, man. They're back in every way. They're going to be big this summer. Everyone's going to want a fairy. Got to get your kid. Yeah. The hottest toy is going to be, do you want to be re-enchanted? Look at this. Oh my gosh, it's a goblin. It ate my nose. Yeah. Well, you got to be careful.
But I really think that you had that point on your podcast with Baz about the ghost in the machine and the reintroduction of magic kind of saying through the questions of science. I think that questions there reopens the door to enchantment. That this says it has our scientific age is kind of reaching its climax. People are beginning to go back to the mythology age, and it seems to be like a tossing and turning between the fairies here, fairies gone. Has science increased, fairies go. Has our faith in science begins to subside for whatever reason, fairies return.
Yep. Well, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Tolkien uses the word enchantment, capital E, quite a few times in the which always makes me very happy. We should always capitalize enchantment is my stance. Enchantment is important. Whole concept we need to reintroduce into the world. But he differentiates enchantment from magic. And so this is something, and if you've even read it, you said you got through halfway of Two Towers?
Yeah, I'm halfway through the Two Towers.
Okay, so you've probably encountered this theme in Lord of the Rings, yeah. Because in the character of Saruman is really the embodiment of magic for Tolkien,
Mm.
and the character of Gandalf is a lot more enchantment.
Hmm.
Uh, because they both wield magical power, and if you're like a hyper nerd, you both know that they're of the Astari sent to Middle Earth to turn the tide against evil,
I
which
did
is
know this, yes.
yeah, we all know this. Yes, you're preaching to the choir. Move on. Okay. Uh, but like for Tolkien, supernatural power is real, but it's not the same. There's different kinds, right?
Hmm.
Enchantment is this drawing you in, drawing you towards beauty, drawing you towards the good, drawing you towards the true, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and it's powerful in the sense that, like you said, it grips you. I forget who you were quoting, but the Thomas thinker who has said that it grips you and it makes you go do like it compels you to go do
Yeah.
more good, beautiful, true things, right?
Yeah,
Like it,
it almost like it commands you to not just appreciate it, but to go and share it.
right, and that is enchantment. And
Yeah.
there's so many uh, in actual stories with fairies in like European folklore, usually
Hmm.
the fairies draw in the mortal, who is, by the way, you, dear reader, draws you in and says, "Oh my, by the way, your normal life is turned upside down. Here's this crazy quest I'm going to send you on. Here's this crazy
Hmm.
thing you have to go do." There's I'm thinking of particularly like Irish stories of fairies. Always like usually the fairies are giving some sort of weird task to the protagonist, and the
Hmm.
protagonist has to go do some kind of crazy shit, but then in the end it kind of works out and you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I guess that's what fairies make you do. Enchantment, it has a similar kind of
Hmm.
modus to it, whereas
Yeah.
magic is sort of really the opposite. In magic, it's not power that's gripping you, it's you gripping power.
Hmm.
That by gripping the power with magic, you're seeking to have dominion. I think what is it Tolkien says here, dominion over, over wills, over
Hmm.
things. It says here, yeah, not an art but a technique. So this is magic. It is not an art but a technique. Its desire is power in this world, so not in the next world, not in the world to come. It's power now. Domination of things and wills. And I wrote here in my notes, Saruman. Uh, and that's magic. And so I think maybe this is a way to tie it into what you had mentioned. Yeah, Scarlet Thread Society. I can link to that in the show notes if anyone's interested, and talked a lot about uh, you know views of magic in the early modern period. But I think nowadays science technology has gotten so good that it is basically, to quote Arthur C. Clarke, indistinguishable from magic. But
Hmm.
that's the dangerous part, is that people are starting to see the magic, are starting to see the science as magic and not as enchantment.
Hmm.
They're seeing it as something to grab hold of and to twist and to use, regardless of its consequences.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's maybe the danger of reenchantment, is that people are not, reenchantment is happening.
Hmm.
People are starting to see the ghost in the machine, but they are trying to they're not letting the maybe the holy ghost in the machine grip them. They're trying to just push the ghost into some sort of like little battery and use it to power their whatever they're doing, and
They
that's
see the
that's the
ghost in the
dangerous part.
machine and see they can dominate it. If it was like a fairy
Yep.
in the machine, the fairy would be guiding them to the enchantment.
Yep. And like I said, in folk tales with fairies, in straight up fairy tales where there's actual fairy characters, um very rarely does the mortal protagonist have power over the fairies. There's
Hmm.
some examples of this, but it's very uncommon. The general, well, let's say it's uncommon. The general trend is towards the fairies compelling the poor person to go do random stuff. So
Hmm.
um, obviously, we don't want to have that happen. I think what is the Irish tale, Tego Kane? Yeah, where he has to go carry the dead body around for a while, and because he was a wicked man, and the fairies make him become a better man by carrying a dead
Hmm.
body. You know that story? I don't know if you know that one.
I do not.
I'll link to it in the show notes. It's actually pretty hilarious in a way.
Hmm.
But we don't want that per se, but we do want to be gripped. I think, or at least you and I want to be gripped by something bigger and better than us that makes us go
Hmm.
do good things. The problem is that there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of magic floating
Hmm.
around. It is very tempting to just grab a hold because it's
Yeah.
just there. It's just waiting for us.
Yeah. Well, we think that because we in the information that we live in, that if you have the knowledge, like I'll use a fitness example actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're trying to lose weight and maintain muscle mass, just say you need to have like 200 grams of protein, right?
Right.
An insane amount of protein just to not lose muscle mass.
Yep.
When my argument has been, you're going to lose muscle mass when you try to lose weight. It'd be like, just because we know how much you should have to complete this like the perfect weight drop without losing muscle,
Yep.
we must attempt to do that. If we're not doing that, we're failing. Like, just because we know that if I have 200 grams of protein, if I eat 50 chicken breasts, I'm not going to lose any muscle mass when I'm trying to lose weight. Just because we know that's the case does not mean we should be doing that. You know, just because we have the information, we must act on that information. Not realize, hey, that's insane. Just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Yep.
And that's not maybe not mean good for us that we can do that. There's no, oh, hey, if you want to lose weight and not lose muscle mass, eat 50 chicken breasts a day. It's like, that's kind of stupid. I'm not doing that. But we have this information, crazy. So we say we have to do that.
Yeah, and it sounds, I know you're more of a gym bro. I go for I do the distance running thing. So for me, it's more about just, maintaining muscle mass and, but this is not a athletic podcast, but I hear what you're saying. Like, you can break everything down to numbers, to metrics, to macros, to whatever the hell you want, right? Like, you can have numbers, charts, tables, you can get your body composition tested, you can do all these things. And, maybe they're not all bad. I don't think any of those things are bad, but I think when you start making, there's a real I think to tie it into the concept of temptation. There's a temptation when you're engaged in anything, in this case, working out, getting in shape. There's a temptation to kind of, and this is a temptation, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I'll make I statements in this therapy session. I feel one thing that I have to reckon with, I always have to kind of deal with, is that it's like, I have to ask myself, but why are you working out? Okay, I'm working out to get healthier. That's true. That is true. But that can't be the number one reason why you're working out. That's ridiculous. It's incredibly vain. I probably think this song is about me, so vain. Like, it's ridiculous. You can't just work out for yourself. You want to work out for your family so that you're healthier for them. You want to work out for society so you can help other people around you. Worst case scenario, you can kick some ass if you have to, right? You want to work out and ultimately you want to work out. Now, this sounds very pompous, and I'm not saying I do this perfectly, but I try when I go running to be like, this run may be a good run, it might be a bad run, but I need some enchantment in this run. It can't just be for science. It just can't be for shape, whatever that is. I need to run for God. And that might be, some days it's great and some days it sucks and some days it works out well and some days it doesn't. But regardless of my level of suffering on that, long distance run, it has to be more than just me, right? Obviously, I love to benefit from the run. I feel better. I lose weight. Great. But I look at and I'm certain this because you actually go to gyms, like the gym culture. Like, gyms are healthy, but gym culture can be so toxic.
Yeah. Like, do you notice people who count their macros and count every detail of the calorie?
Oh my gosh, yes.
They think they have all this information, so they have to exert all this control over every facet of their diet. And that is psychotic. You aren't even enjoying the gift of food that God has given. God gave us taste buds, and you are ignoring that gift by boiling your chicken. Because it lowers your macros. What is the point of being healthy if you're miserable because you don't actually appreciate being alive?
Well, you're going to live 20 years longer of living hell. So, and you're going to be a really nasty person to be around. So,
they really are, because they always want to point out how many cigars are what you're drinking. I have a coworker who's 10 years older than me, and he's like, "You really think you should be drinking all those Red Bulls? Can't look at the sugar content." I'm like, when I'm old like you, I will stop drinking Red Bull.
Yeah, well, and I am definitely at least 10 years older than you. And I will tell you, there comes a day when you realize you can't do that anymore.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm not going to, I'm like, okay, but we're all at different stages of life. And, I'm going to guess, I'm going to almost be certain that you're going to say yes. Like, when I work out, I'm only ever competing with myself, right? Like, I'm only competing with me, right? Then this is my thing. It's like, if my wife is at has different fitness goals than me, and she just wants to get walking, and I think that's great. And I always support her on walks, and I go on walks with her. And it's like, she'll sometimes say, well, I can't do, whatever 10K runs. I'm like, yeah, well, but you probably shouldn't be, because that's not what's for you. That's just what I do.
Mhm.
Right? Like that's my like we all have different ways of attaining, we all have different virtuous ways of being in the world, and there's not
Mhm.
necessarily one way that you should do it. But at the same time, right? Yeah, like if you boil down, because working out, getting in shape, bettering yourself, that's virtuous. But if you boil it down to this overly scientified, magicified
Mhm.
way of doing it, yeah, it's just like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? It's
Yeah.
preposterous.
The danger of magic and trying to say you can control the outcomes of everything because you have the information is a weird danger in today's world,
Oh
and it's
yeah,
the exact opposite of the enchantment that we should be striving towards. Like it's yeah, I know we went on a tangent about fitness here, but it is a good
it
analogy for
connects.
the
It
situation.
totally connects. No, it totally connects, because fitness is a way of attempting to control your environment,
Mhm.
right? And that's not necessarily bad, but when you attempt to control your environment, whatever that is, you are theoretically, I always remind my students of this. Anytime you learn something new, you try to, or you do something new or try to improve at anything, you're
Mhm.
technically engaging in magic. And you need to be really careful that you're doing it for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so this is something that, anyhow, yeah, people who watch the show know that I'm pretty autistically focused on this, but it's important. But we live in a world that is so, devoid of any sort of broader responsibilities. And so people will just go, they're like, yeah, I ran a marathon for Instagram likes. And I'm like, fuck, that's awful. I would run a
Yeah.
marathon because I'd be like, wow, I ran a marathon, and maybe I,
Mhm.
got some donations to a better cause or something. Like, do something
Mhm.
with that. Why else are you
Yeah.
doing it? Right?
Well, it seems like one of the downsides of this lack of enchantment is that there's a lack you have a lack of enchantment. So you have a lack of this. So a lack without enchantment is a lack of connection to beauty, and beauty
Yep.
is a path that leads to God because God is beauty itself.
Yep.
And so you kind of lock yourself in this cell where you are the only thing in there, and you become your own God. And
Yep.
when you lack this enchantment, you lack the source of God. You also lack destiny. This is one thing I was talking about earlier. All my atheist coworkers and friends, there's no sense of destiny. There's no sense of teleology. There's no sense of fate. It's just whatever they desire in that moment.
Yep.
And I can't imagine. I can't imagine waking up and just saying whatever I want, I'm going to give for myself today. How do you live without a sense of destiny? Like, why do you get like? I ask Marge. I go down to consume and bone about like, why do you get out of bed in the morning?
Yep.
And it inevitably ends up with him going like, well, I just want to experience pleasure, I guess. Like, well, why aren't you on drugs? If you only go with pleasure, why aren't you doing drugs?
Yeah. Why aren't you smoking crack every single day of your life?
Exactly. I mean, if you want to who people, the only people who live for if you want to see people who live only for themselves and pure pleasure, go to Skid Row. That's
Well,
what
and
those
and
people are.
I live in the People's Democratic Republic of Chaz Chop, and we got a lot of those types here. And it's maybe that's well, I mean, I'm not trying to, I mean, I feel awful for them and I want to help them as much as I can, but at the same time, it is a reminder of like, this is what, yeah, living for pleasure is this.
Yes.
Not living for enchantment, but living for pleasure, which is something different, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you can experience just a tiny bit of enchantment with like a really good, at least for me, like a really good bottle of wine can give you
Mm-hmm.
just a little taste of enchantment. It's not all of enchantment, but it can be like, you're like, wow, this is like truly an amazing experience. And I'm sharing it with some friends and we're having good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a wonderful time, right? Like that would be like an enchanting version of this, but like the magic version, the grasping on version is like, I'm going to smoke all of the fentanyl and just like pass out and die.
Yes.
Which, and unfortunately, I think it's not revolutionary or not new to say that our culture really pushes towards the latter
Mm-hmm.
and not the former. And yeah, so I don't know. Sorry, I got tangents within tangents, but this all connects to this dichotomy, right? The
Mm-hmm.
tension between enchantment good and magic bad, at least for Tolkien, how he defines them. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to say with this, so many
Yeah,
quotes to
jump where you
read.
want. Jump where you want.
Um,
We wander on this channel, so it's whatever you want, man.
not
Yeah,
all those
explore the text.
we wander, but we're not lost. So very
Exactly.
important to
Another
say.
Tolkien quote. I appreciate that. Yes.
Um, I will say on the point of enchantment and the destiny thing is his final paragraphs in the essay about like rejoining like the Christ, the Bible story the Bible is a fairy story that encountered that became incarnate into this world through Jesus, and that we can take part of that story, has a sense of destiny and a sense of enchantment.
Yep.
Was a really great way to end this thing. And
I
it's too
think
long to read, but anyone listening, even if you can't get through this, try. Listen to it, sit there, make yourself get through it. This is for the ending of this ending of it. Way it ends, I was in tears. It's so good.
It is really good, and I knew that I was blown away. I was kind of a little blown away you hadn't read it, and that's why I also pushed you to read this because I knew that. So I obviously just dig this in general, but you as a cat, I'm like, you as a Catholic are really gonna like this.
Yeah.
Like you're really gonna like it.
I would say every time Tolkien was listing things that could be scenes that can enchant you, like the stone, the grass, the trees, the rivers. He always ended it with bread and wine.
Yep, I noticed that too.
As a Catholic, like that is a Eucharistic influence right there, and I love that. He never straight up says that, but you could tell like bread and
I
wine,
could tell too.
You could tell exactly what he wants to say, but he's not saying, and it's fantastic.
I know Caleb, but some of us Protestants also have sacraments and also celebrate. Yeah, I know we don't share communion, but we still have those. Okay,
yes, we do.
Just reminding you. Just reminding you.
I'm in the middle of Florida. There are no sacramentally valid Protestants here.
Yeah, well, there's very few. Well, at least you have somebody who believes down there. Up here in the Northwest, we have people who it's the most atheist or agnostic part of the country. Like there's just people who they have nothing.
I hate agnostics. I'd rather you be an atheist than an agnostic.
Me too.
Make a claim. Agnostics, all of agnosticism rests on this claim of ignorance, and it's just like it's not only is it stupid. Why would you claim ignorance and be proud of your claim of ignorance? And the idea that claiming ignorance is a virtue, because like, well, I'm the middle of the road. I don't take sides. You a pussy, is what you are. Take a side.
Well, I grew up agnostic because of the culture I was raised in, and I always felt that very lacking of anything, and that's what drew me to the Christian faith initially. Was I was like, there's got to be something more. This literally can't be all there is. Like, this is just false. Like, this can't be what there is. Like, this is if there is only this agnostic maybe, then that's dumb. I was like that's got to be stupid. Like, there has to be more, because why? Like, the reference to bread and wine there ties us into what Tolkien calls the eucatastrophe. So combining, Eucharist in the literal Greek sense of thanks, a feast of thanksgiving, and catastrophe, sort of the end of everything, or a complete breaking apart. He takes these and in typical Tolkien fashion, smashes them together beautifully to make the word eucatastrophe, which is a word that I try to say as much as I can to people who don't know anything about Tolkien, particularly people who don't know anything about Christianity, is that there's, eucatastrophic, eucatastrophe. I always try to, it's in my everyday life. Anytime I can throw it in there, like, hey, that's a eucatastrophe. What's that mean? Well, let me tell you.
It's a great word.
It is a great word, and only somebody who's a talented and a world acclaimed philologist such as Tolkien could have thought of something so brilliant. I really do think I am a Tolkien fanboy, but that's okay. It's not a bad thing to be a Tolkien fanboy. Again, it's okay to like things, people.
Yes, my token defense is that he will be a saint one day, and so I get to agree with whatever he says.
Well, so we'll have to cycle back to that because I've been thinking about that lately. So I'm sort of blown away that he's not considered a saint but I'm not part of your church. So
it normally takes 100 years.
It takes a while. I know. Yeah, it takes a while.
But I hope I live long enough to see it, because the Lord of the Rings re-releases, when it also says by Saint Tolkien, are going to go so hard.
I know.
It's going to be the hardest covers ever, and I can't wait for it.
They are coming back in theaters this summer, people. So keep it in mind.
That is, when I saw that, I'm like, I'm going on an adventure. Quick tangent. I would defend the Hobbit films.
That has to be a separate episode because I have some strong opinions about that. But
it's not Peter Jackson's fault. Is my first take on that one.
That's true.
And they had incredible casting.
That's true.
It's just studio involvement. Is everything bad in it is studio involvement.
Well, and you know that the first The Hobbit films was co-written or completely written by Guillermo del Toro, and he was supposed to have a bigger artistic influence, and he got there was scheduling or something, and he ended up writing the script but not doing the visual stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can you imagine a Guillermo del Toro Hobbit?
He's so good,
weird and cool. Good. Yeah, he's so really good.
His movies scare me because they have how do I put this? I don't know what word we use for this, but I'm gonna call it a horror enchantment, where there's like this and the dark side of fairyland, I guess you would say, the underworld of fairyland, where the drows are or something.
Yep.
But there is like a similar level of enchantment but
Yep.
in a weird, negative, but also positive. I guess I can't put it into words, but there's something there about his films, and this
Yes.
like he's not influenced by fairies. I mean, he claims to have been visited by aliens in his younger days or demons or something. And so if he was visited by a dark elf or a drow or something, and it had this influence, I see that like negative enchantment that he has. That it's really interesting. That I want to eventually watch his films and like dive into that concept some more because that's a very interesting concept.
Well, I will tell you, Caleb, on this channel, we do film analysis as well. You're more than welcome to come back and talk about Guillermo del Toro. I love him. So
Oh,
yeah,
that'd
let's
be
have you
fun.
back on for that at some point.
Love to.
Eucatastrophe.
Yes.
This is, I think, this is in the epilogue. If anyone's reading or trying to find the place, it's in the epilogue. You know, Eucharist as a celebration of thanksgiving or joy combined with catastrophe. We don't tend to think of those things as being connected, at least in the sort of the secular world, right? There's either pain bad, fleeting happiness good, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't have those together. Now, obviously, I'm talking to a Catholic here, so you're like, well, hold on a sec, because look to the cross. And for me, as a whatever you want to call it, I'm doing the Anglican thing now, right? Like as somebody who's a Protestant, but definitely more, liturgically minded. Yeah, I mean, we also look to the cross as like, Christ is the most dolorous, suffering man, and is also the happiest, most joyful man because he is uniting humanity and God. And I think that's probably
the paradox of Christianity, as Chesterton would say.
Yeah, the paradox of Christianity, the awfully wonderful part of Good Friday, right? We're still in the season of Easter, so we can talk. We should talk about that always, but particularly the season of Easter, that's it doesn't make sense, and that's kind of the idea.
Like we are celebrating immense suffering for what it brought about and are thankful for it, but also like, sorry we had to make you do that, God. The paradox of it is it's always impossible to put into words.
Yeah,
it's also a beautiful mystery and a beautiful paradox, and you kind of have to. It's one of those things that forces you to just sit there and think.
Yep.
You can't put it into words without sounding stupid, contradicting yourself, or bastardizing the concept. But you have to kind of just force yourself into like, I need to be enchanted by this. I need to sit here and just let the enchantment come.
Yep. Well, and I'm somebody so I'm doing the whole Anglican thing now, and very happy to have found a home there. But I come out of a Lutheran background, and Luther. I mean, I know we might have some disagreements, Caleb, about Luther.
I would defend Luther. He is an incredible writer.
Yes,
I actually love everything I read from him. I'm like, I disagree with it, but I can't deny the sheer talent he had, and also the Jews and Their Lies is a very fun book.
It is. It's a zazzy book. It's a zazzy book.
It's incredible.
Yeah, there is a bit, and I think there's in his Heidelberg Confession, which again might be really inside baseball for you. So he talks about being a theologian of the cross. And then sort of a lot of Protestants will spin that off into this concept of a theology of the cross, right? Which is that we as opposed to a theology of glory, that the place where we find, Christ most present is the place where there is the most suffering and the most brokenness. That's where God is the most interested in people who recognize and experience brokenness, not because brokenness is good, but because that's where you have no more pretensions, you have no more lies about how good I am, or all the great things I've been doing, or and I just got done talking about how I've been running fine, all my runs, I'm making such great progress. I'm always like, yeah, but what are you in the face of the creator of everything? Yeah. Nothing, but he still loves you, and he shows that at the foot of the cross, right?
For Catholics, that's every time we're in line at the confessional.
Yeah.
That's right. We're sitting in line like, yep, I yesterday I'm riding high, and now I'm like, I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah, and I think
wonderful.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's what I was to say. It's wonderful, is all.
It is. No, it is, and you can really see in the Heidelberg again. I challenge you, papist. That's a joke. To read it, because you really see that Luther is actually still Catholic. That's my theory. Is he always stays Catholic even to the end, because his understanding of suffering on the cross, suffering, all that is so Catholic. And actually,
he's the most Catholic Lutheran.
And it's funny because when other Protestants read that, they get wiggy. They get uncomfortable. And so I purposely recommend it to my fellow Protestants, that you should read this thing,
Mhm.
because it is so A, it's just because it's so good, but B,
Mhm.
because it's so Catholic. You're like, yeah, Luther was still kind of Catholic. Like, we don't, because like for me, this is something that I always sort of this does connect to eucatastrophe, and I'm certain you'd probably agree. I don't want to be told, um, you're a good person,
Mhm.
right? Oh, or everything will be fine. No, obviously, I do want everything to be fine. I want what Tolkien calls the happy ending, but I
Mhm.
don't want it cheaply, right? Like, I'm like, don't
Yes.
just tell me things are going to be fine because my life's falling apart right now,
Mhm.
right? Don't tell me. And a few years ago, we had somebody in our family uh, get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and then die really quickly, and it was a horrific death.
Cool.
And like, I don't. Of course, I want to be told that there's meaning to the suffering.
Mhm.
I want to be told that this means something, but I don't want to be told, oh, it's okay, it'll be fine in the end. It's like, well, yeah, but what about the pain that this person's going through? Does that have
Mhm.
any meaning, right? I don't want it cheap. I want it to be important enough, right? Like I don't want to be
Mhm.
told that my sin is okay. I want to be told that I'm forgiven. There's a difference, right?
Mhm.
Oh, it's okay. I don't want to hear that. I want to
Yeah.
hear you are forgiven. That's what I want to hear, right?
Mhm.
Because like I'm the one I'm like, it's not okay. Maybe that's just because I'm so autistic, but I'm like, it's actually not okay that I did that and I feel horrible. I want to be told I'm forgiven, which is different, right? And I think that there's something connected to Tolkien's idea of eucatastrophe, or that like it is awful, it is a catastrophe, but there's joy coming out of that unexpectedly, right? There's what Tolkien says, like the unexpected turn. I think he says the
Mhm.
turn towards the good that you didn't expect coming, that didn't seem to be possible. Somehow I am redeemed in spite of everything.
Mhm.
That's a good thing because it's not cheap. And I think,
Yes.
to tie back into our culture thing that we've been talking about,
Mhm.
people want the easy out. They want the only, they don't want to suffer for anything.
Mhm.
Um, that just feels completely fake to me. And I think
Yeah.
that Tolkien is somebody who suffered quite immensely,
Yeah.
and also,
Mhm.
and was somebody who is so well versed in capital S story and then
Mhm.
individual stories that he studied throughout his career. He got that, right? Like
Yeah.
a story where they're like, there once was a princess and a prince, and they got married, and everything was fine. That's a really boring
It
story.
would be.
What does that story about, right? Oh, here's a story about like a prince and he was double crossed and there was this thing and there was
Mhm.
that thing and he was almost killed. And then at the end, he could kill the bad guy, but he's like, you know what? I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to be merciful. You're like, wow, that story, right? A story like
Dude,
that. You're
that
like,
actually
whoa.
the best example we have in modern media of like the hero forgiving the monster is Spider-Man 3.
Yep.
The way that ends was him forgiving Sandman. Tears almost every time. Like
Yeah.
it so perfect that the way people make fun of that movie, I will never understand because it has so many good moments in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's a Sam Raimi film, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sam Raimi's a
great
great
director,
director. Yeah.
great
Great
director.
director. Yeah.
So I have two few thoughts from what you just said. One of the things I want to
Please.
say,
Yeah.
this is actually completely not disconnected, but it's a pure divine providence. I have this next to me because I was reading from it earlier. This is from a Fulton Scene. It's a story. He's on your point about sin and being told, I don't want to be told it's okay. I want to be told I'm forgiven. This
Yeah.
is from Mr. Fulton Scene's book, the seven last words, was his commentary on Christ's seven last words on the cross.
Yeah.
He has this little story about Saint Jerome in here. I think you're gonna love it.
Okay. Tell
He
it.
says, one day our blessed Lord appeared to Saint Jerome, saying to him, Jerome, what will you give me? Jerome answered, I will give you my writings. To which our Lord replied, that is not enough. Then said Jerome, what shall I give you? My life of penance and mortification? But the answer was, even that is not enough. What have I left to give thee? Cried Jerome. Our blessed Lord answered Jerome, you can give me your sins.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is a
profound. Profound.
fantastic.
And yeah, and it's tying in. There's not as Obi-Wan Kenobi would say, there in my experience, there is no such thing as luck. This is all we're all connected. It's all connected, man.
Yeah. The
Particularly
divine
on this channel.
that is actually
There's
the biggest thing with Tolkien I got probably is this like appreciation of divine providence.
yes.
Like once I kind of like once I kind of like I don't know, I can't explain it, but it kind of just it clicked for me one day. Like it's all part of God's divine plan. That no matter what happens to me, because I've not experienced any major tragedies. I've been very fortunate in that way. But like little things that would piss people off, I'm like, that's actually hilarious. Like, how is it funny? Like, it'd be very funny in a year now, so why can't I laugh about it now?
That's a very good attitude to have.
yeah.
I wish I could. Some days I can attain that, and many days I cannot. But I
Yeah.
hope
Well,
to.
I'm also young enough and fortunate that I've not actually experienced any major tragedies. And so
Yeah.
I get to have this mindset as someone who has not suffered yet.
Well, build it up now because there will be suffering at some point,
Yes,
right?
I
Like,
know it's coming. That's not the
yeah,
great thing about being Catholic. I just know, like being Christian, like okay, my trial is coming. Like one day I'm going to be tempted. One day the trial is coming. The suffering will hit me. The devil's going to try, and I just got to be ready for it. And this kind of like build up an appreciation for divine providence. I think is helping me cultivate. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but no, it was Lucer. Yeah, it was Martin Luther who said this thing about when you can't scare the devil away with scripture, just laugh at him or something.
yeah. And Luther also said that you should fart at the devil.
Which
Well,
I think that's also a good saying. I think that's good.
yeah, it is. Well, but do you know that? Do you know? So to be fair, everyone listening, the Catholic brought up Luther. It wasn't just me. So
I really appreciate Lucer as a Catholic. I actually really appreciate Lucer.
Do you know his whole
Catholic friends?
Have you heard his whole thing of the Sancte Satanae Ora Pro Nobis joke?
I have not.
So apparently, like I think it's something like I'm probably slightly misquoting it here, but I think it's more or less accurate. He was constantly tempted and attacked by the devil. He wrote a lot about this. He called it his Anfechtungen, his attacks or his spiritual sufferings. It's basically his dark night of the soul, is what he's experiencing. And he basically was like, the Satan's throwing all of his sins in his face, and he says, basically, Sancte Satanae Ora Pro Nobis, which is a joke, saying like, oh, Satan, pray for us, because you must know what it is to be virtuous if you know. Oh, and like apparently like totally like pissed the devil off and just left. He's like, oh, well, you must really know what virtue is because you're Satan, right? So you must, and like totally just doing a 180, which I think is just rhetorically brilliant.
It is.
Brilliant. Yeah. This totally ties into something that we heard about in homily, at least in my church last Sunday. It was a good reminder. I had heard it before, but it's always good to be reminded, right? Like most of learning is not really learning new things, it's being reminded of the thing you already knew. Is that the opposite of sin is not necessarily virtue, it's faith. Because the virtue can always be, yeah, well, but I'm so virtuous. Yeah, but maybe you had an easy life, or maybe that was an easy virtue to have, right, for you. But you can always have done more, right? Couldn't you have done more? It's like the bit at the end of Schindler's List a bit, right? You could have always done more and you didn't. So virtue, of course, is a good thing. We want virtue, but this is important for me to remind myself, like virtue is good, but it can easily give way to pride. But faith, there's no pride in faith, right? Yeah. Faith, you can't have pride in faith. Faith is like, I have nothing. Only you, Christ, can give me what I need. That's faith.
Absolutely.
And that totally connects too, I think, to this whole thing of eucatastrophe, of the unexpected turn of, it literally is that it's so over, we are so back moment of history.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I want to read this bit from
yes.
a token. It's this bit about science fiction.
Yes.
It's a bit long, but I think it'd be good to kind of like spark the conversation.
Do it.
The rawness and ugliness of modern European life, that real life whose contact we should welcome, is a sign of the biological inferiority of the insufficient or false reaction to environment. This is a quote from somebody else. The maddest castle that ever came out of the giant's bag in a wild Gaelic story is not so much less ugly than a robot factory. It is also, to use a very modern phrase, in a very real sense, a great deal more real. Why should we not escape from or condemn the grim Assyrian absurdity of top hats, or the my grandmother keeps popping up all these like suggestions of autocorrect. The Moroccan horror of factories. They are condemned even by the writers of the most escapist form of all literature, stories of science fiction. These prophets often foretell, and many seem to yearn for a world like the one big glass-roofed railway station. But from them, it is as a rule very hard to gather what men in such a world town would do. They may abandon the full Victorian I don't know that word, panoply, for a loose garment with zip fasteners. But we will use this freedom mainly, it would appear, in order to play with mechanical toys and soon crawling, I don't know what, games of moving at high speed. To judge by these tales, they will still be as lustful, vengeful, and greedy as ever. And the ideas of their idealists hardly reach farther than the splendid notion of building more towns of the same sort as the planets. It is indeed an age of an improved means to disoriented ends.
Yep.
Which I think is I'm talking. I like science fiction. I think they're all good science fiction, but also I think the science fiction of the 20th century is actually not good.
Okay.
I think it's only like later science fiction that is good. Like I can't like the Time Machine. No, Brave New World. Not a big fan of it. I can't name any like pre-21st century science fiction I've enjoyed.
Well, yeah, I think as I said on the if people want to listen, I was talking all about cyberpunk on Scarlet Thread Society, but yeah, I think cyberpunk is one of the few shining bits of modern sci-fi because I think you and I talked about this on our live stream, yes, that cyberpunk is one of the few subgenres of modern sci-fi that really is willing to be completely honest about technology's role in our life. Oh yeah, it controls you.
Yeah. I think the only good sci-fis have to be dystopian.
Yes,
I mean,
pretty much.
utopian sci-fis end up being, like Tolkien said, the ideas of the idealists hardly reach farther than this blended notion of building more towns at the same sort as other planets.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, yeah, true. Tolkien probably would have hated Star Trek, now that I think about it.
Well, and he hated Dune.
Yes.
Which makes me a little sad. It's the one area where I really disagree with him, and I'm like, you're wrong, but fine.
I don't get I don't fully grasp or get his criticism of Dune or his dislike for Dune, but I've also never read the Dune books.
Oh, you should.
They're on the list. No, I'm probably gonna download the first three when I do my cross country road trip.
Yeah,
I'm gonna download the first three so I can listen to them.
I think Tolkien's critique was something like probably had to do with the fact that the Dune stories are about deconstructing heroes, and they don't build up anything in their place.
Yeah.
They kind of just, and so the reason I like Dune is because it deconstructs bad heroes, but the reason I think a weakness of the Dune world is that it does not give you anybody else to take the place. And one of the things that I think, as much as I love Frank Herbert, as much as I love Dune, I like Tolkien a lot better because Tolkien doesn't give you a Muad'Dib who's a religious fanatic and like just kills a lot of people. Spoiler. He gives you an Aragorn who only kills when he has to, and ultimately is only, even when he does kill, is only doing it to establish, to reestablish the throne of Gondor, right? Like there's something noble about what Aragorn is doing. And it's not that Aragorn is perfect, because he's not, but he's somebody to look up to. And Paul Muad'Dib is definitely not somebody to look up to. So I think was probably a lot of Tolkien's beef with Dune, is that there was no positive hero figure. Something like that. So
that gets into the problem with modern fantasy, where they either want to do really bad good versus evil, whereas like what's evil for evil's sake, and I'll point to Harry Potter as an example.
Yeah.
And then or the Game of Thrones morally gray, where it's like I don't care about any of these characters. The only character Game of Thrones I cared about was Ned Stark because it was played by Sean Bean.
Yeah. And then, of course, we know what happens. So, spoilers. Yeah, if you haven't known by now, you should.
This show's been out for so long.
By now.
If you don't know now, you're living under a rock. How'd you find this podcast?
Yeah.
There's so much to say with Tolkien on his. I mean, Lord of the Rings is arguably a perfect work, I would say.
It's close. It's not perfect, but it's close.
It's like a near perfect. It's a near perfect mythology.
I think part of the reason why we view it as we do rightly esteem it so highly. I agree. Obviously, I'm a huge. I mean, I have a tattoo from The Hobbit on my body. I underwent physical pain for my love of the story. So, I'm one of those people. But I think part of the reason, like, Lord of the Rings is great. It is great in and of itself. It is awesome. But I also can't help at the same time think that I think it's great also because modern storytelling just doesn't even aspire to anything greater than the immediate, gratification. Like, because if you go, like, for every century you go back in time, the storytelling improves.
Mm.
And like by the time you're like 400 years ago, Shakespeare, I mean, I know I'm an Anglo-Maxi, but I'm like fucking amazing. Like
Yep.
Shakespeare's just
Yep.
great. It's great. Even the villains, even the bad guys are like compelling. Like
Mm.
even like Richard III is compelling and he's a horrible person, but you're like, I just kind of, but it's compelling, right?
Yeah.
Like because like it's people actually had it's almost like story, capital S, what
Mm.
Tolkien would say, story had been like it wasn't killed, but it was so squeezed down. It's like you were
Mhm.
like barely a few drops of story were coming out, and every once in a while you
Mhm.
get a few things and it'd be okay. And then all of a sudden with Lord of the Rings, it's like open up the tap. Welcome
Mhm.
back to story. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, story. It's so great. There's just so much story happening. So of course, Lord of the Rings is great, but I can't. I wonder how much of that is just that we've been so impoverished,
Mm.
in our storytelling, at least in the English language, right? Like,
Yes. I do have to. I will quick have to tell my Shakespeare story. So
okay,
I was very lucky growing up that I was being homeschooled in Orlando. This is I'm in Polk County, it's very close to Orlando. There's the Orlando Shakespeare Theater, which has been horrendously and tragically renamed Orlando Shakes instead of
ugh,
the Orlando Shakespeare Theater. And I about declared this. I about started a war. I was like, I emailed and called the place. I was furious.
yeah, you should be.
Um, I mean, the first thing I saw that Julius Evola article, the Negrifying of America. Um, but anyway, I went and saw Caesar performed.
Yeah,
And I was a huge Star Trek Next Generation fan. Still am. I will defend Star Trek in certain instances that it has great storytelling moments. And I'm
okay.
watching it. I'm watching the Caesar play, and Michael Dorn is playing Brutus.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they do the Cedar would get Michael Dorn as Patrick Stewart sometimes to show up and do performances. It was not a small time Cedar, it was an actual legit Shakespeare Cedar. And so they had Michael Dorn playing Brutus. So I was like probably 12. That morning I was watching Next Generation thinking, what's my favorite character? And I go to this field trip and I get to sit down in this room and I'm like, that's Michael Dorn playing
That's
Brutus.
cool. That's
It
awesome.
was an incredible experience. I
By
actually
the way,
can't read
Worf
Caesar
people,
anymore.
Worf. We're talking about
Oof.
Worf. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Yeah.
I can't read Caesar now because I saw it performed so perfectly that trying to read it's just like nope, doesn't compare. I saw it performed by Michael Dorn perfectly. Doesn't compare. I can't read it.
Yeah, no, Shakespeare is one of the I was just talking about this the other day, because it was Shakespeare's death and birthday anniversary recently.
Mm.
And there was this I think I retweeted it. There was this a compilation somebody did of various sonnets being read by like Ian McKellen. So speaking of
Mm.
Lord of the Rings, the Dame Judi Dench, love her so much. Just
Mm-hmm.
like when you have a talented actor such as Michael Dorn, so or Judi Dench or whoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Ian McKellen who knows and loves Shakespeare perform it live. It's just
Yeah.
that
But
that to me, that's a moment of enchantment. That's a moment of
yes,
enchantment.
yes.
When I hear that, I'm like, I am now enchanted.
Well, that's why I still have a hard time reading Shakespeare. I've seen so many of these plays performed live that it really is just it is a way to experience Shakespeare. It's just to see it performed live by talented actors. It just the reading is good, but it doesn't even compare to that experience. And so I love Shakespeare, but all my memories of him are from like being 12 to 14 watching these plays. Um, the art is incredible. That's actually Shakespeare ties very heavily into my Star Trek defense. Is that Star Trek actually has really good acting. If you realize they really only hired stage actors and they're all doing stage acting. And so if you view it like it's a pseudo production with the style of acting they're doing, it's not overacted, it's just stage acting. And it actually works very well for Star Trek.
Okay, you might be changing my mind. Maybe I need to go back and give Star Trek a second chance
We
because
just watched one episode, DS9, season 7, season 6, and the Pale Moonlight is a phenomenal, probably one of the best sci-fi anything ever made. It's incredible, and they use these brilliant stage actors, and the way they acted out everything is like there's a scene where it's like a 5 minute monologue of Captain Cisco talking to his recorded log, and it's
oh,
just
very
the camera's
nice.
on him as he's drinking, he's walking around the couch, and you can just imagine sitting there and that's a stage, and he is sitting in the audience watching him just deliver this brilliant performance.
Well, and that's a soliloquy, right? Like, say what you want about the show, the American version of House of Cards, and there's many things you can say about it that have already been said.
Yes.
Say what you want about Kevin Spacey. There's many things that have been said. Yes,
Yes.
but but Frank Underwood's soliloquies are kind of amazing,
They are.
right? Like they really like from that Richard III kind of villain perspective, they are kind of amazing. Like I really do think
I would defend House of Cards as long as it was from whenever he left is when the show immediately was like, I'm not watching it anymore.
Yeah.
But the first like 3 seasons of that are brilliant, well acted. Like I would look past terrible shows if the acting is really good.
Yeah.
Like good acting. It's hard to find, but when you can find interviews with actors actually talking about the craft of acting, it's fascinating stuff.
I totally agree. Well, we've jumped here, there, and everywhere, but that's pretty normal. Were there any other little? I mean, I'm on no rush, but were there any other like little tasty bits here you wanted to get into, or we could always have you come back. It's really up to you.
I have one more thing I want to read from Tolkien here, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
I desired dragons was a profound desire. Of course, I in my timid body did not wish to have them in my neighborhood, and truly of my relatively safe world, in which it was, for instance, possible to read in peace of mind, free from fear. But the word that was contained, even the imagination of Fëanor, was richer and more beautiful. At whatever cost of peril, the dweller in the quiet and fertile plains may hear of the tormented hills and the unvast sea, and long for them in his heart. For the heart is hard, but the body be soft.
Amen.
It's a said. Great line. Great little.
It is a great line.
So good.
It is a great line, and yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I can't remember what's that, but he has this talk about like the adventures and stories like will never quench your thirst, but will always wet your palate and make you thirstier for adventure. I'm butchering how he said it because, like I said earlier, you can't talk about Tolkien without having to quote Tolkien because you're going to butcher whatever he said. Pretty much. He has this line somewhere about I'm not going to be able to find it, but it was like a wonderful line about how adventure like makes you hungry. Reading about adventures makes you hungry for adventure, and I know that 100% is true because when I was this is a bit of a story, but I got off of work one day on a Thursday and it was a rough week. And when I have a rough week, I know if it's a rough week or a rough couple of days, I'm taking a road trip to the coast of Florida to see the sunset. I need to see beauty. I need to be enchanted. I'm gonna go see the sunset on the ocean. And so I'm making the road trip over there, listening to Lord of the Rings. I was just thinking, I need an adventure. I need an adventure of some kind. And I'm driving on the road, middle of nowhere, back roads, Duet, Florida, if anyone knows what that is. It's nowhere. There's one gas station in the entire area. So I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I'm thinking to myself, this isn't an adventure. It's a glorified road trip. Come on, God, I want an adventure. And literally as I said, come on, God, my tires blew. So I'm trying to now change my tire on the side of this backwoods middle of nowhere road where there are semi trucks flying by, and so I'm trying to change my tire. At one point I had to dive behind my vehicle because the semi truck was getting too close.
Oh wow!
So I finally get it changed. I'm like, okay, if I rush quickly, I can still make the sunset. My phone's at 4%. I have no idea where I'm going, so I am just looking at trying to find this like gas station or something to buy at Sarzo. And I come across this one where clearly everyone inside is Mexican. They barely speak English. And I'm like, my hands are covered in like tires and oil and grease. This is disgusting. I'm dirty. I want to wash my hands. There's a bathroom that says like employees only. And I go to talk to the guy, like, can I use the bathroom? And I could see in his eyes he wants to say no, but he saw my crucifix and he had one on. He's like, sir, go ahead.
Very nice.
And so he let me in to use the bathroom. And then I'm rusted. I'm speeding through I'm running red lights. I'm speeding. And my phone on music started playing like one of the can't remember what it was, but it was one of the Lord of the Rings soundtracks about like with the wrestling. And my mind immediately went, come on, Saddlefax, show us the meaning of haste. And I'm just running these red lights. I park, I run to the beach to see the sunset. It's so cloudy you can't see anything.
And
but you like, got this is like it's a perfect analogy for the event. So the event,
yeah, well, you got what you asked for. You got what you prayed for. Be careful. Be careful. You know, it's the DJ Khaled meme. You done prayed yourself. Be careful what you pray for, right? Like
exactly.
We've talked about that. I have a friend of the show, Elliot, comes on a bit, and he's talked about before about like he's like, yeah, when I was growing up, I prayed for wisdom. Be careful what you pray for.
I had that same prayer. Yes.
Yeah, be careful because sometimes God's like, okay, you're like, oh no.
Yes. Yeah. And it was it was a wonderful event, because I'm like, I realized when I got back, I was soaked in sweat, hands were greasy and dirty. I didn't see the sunset, but I could not have been happier. You could not
Yeah.
have the smile off my face. But I got exactly what I wanted. It was perfect. I think it's someone on my Twitter thread. I made a whole tweet thread explaining the story, and I made memes in it. It was like Saruman casting a spell on mountaintop. It was like me getting a flat tile. Like the wizards cast a spell and gave me the flat tile. It's a whole like half events or half travel blog thread on my Twitter if anyone wants to try to find it. I think it's pretty funny.
Awesome.
But that enchantment with the Avinso and this getting it was a wonderful. It was truly like a not life changing, but it was mind changing. Where like I began to view things differently after that day.
Yep. I totally know what you mean. I think I think most people have had experience. If you're paying attention, most people have had experiences like that. If you're willing to pay attention, you've had them. And if maybe you weren't cognizant of them at the time, but you've had them. If you're just willing to listen. Yeah.
Stop consuming and listen.
Yep. Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for staying for so long. I know there's a huge time difference, so I appreciate that. Where can people find you and your great work?
So there is the Thomist Review Substack, Thomist Reviews on YouTube and on Spotify. I'm on Twitter at Trash Socrates. I tweet about philosophy, theology, whatever comes to my mind, jokes, a little bit of everything. Podcast covers a little bit of everything. If you enjoy what I said here, you hopefully enjoy what I say elsewhere. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and definitely subscribe and follow this podcast because it's incredible and this guy is awesome.
Well, we're very, very kind of you to say that. No, you were very nice and had me on recently. I'll make sure to link to all those things in the show notes. And I guess final message, I guess I'd say to people to just look for enchantment because it's already around you. It's already happening. Cool. Well, Caleb, let's have you on again. And I do mean that, okay?
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah. And everyone, take it easy. Enjoy your weekend. And peace, everyone. See you next time.